In this tutorial, we're going to show you how to use MobileNation to create your very own instant messaging client. Messaging client is database backed and enables you to send messages to one another in real time. So I'll just send a message. And if I hit send, the message pops up here. So in this tutorial, we're going to be using Microsoft Windows Azure SQL service. So let's get cracking and start building an app. So Microsoft SQL Azure is a service from Microsoft. You can get a free 90-day trial from those guys, and you can get to it by going to windows.azure.com. I'm just going to log in with my account. And I'm just going to go to a database that I created earlier called testing. So let me go and manage that. And I'm just going to log into my database. And in our database, we're going to add a table called instant messaging. Take note of that server URL as well, because we'll be using that to connect to in MobileNation. So I'm just going to go to Design, and I'm going to create a brand new table. Hit New Table, and I'm going to call it Instant Messages. You can see it's created a couple of columns already, so we're going to leave this one, and we'll say that ID is an identity and it's a primary key. We're going to create another one called name. That can be a varchar 50. We'll do another one called message, which is going to correspond to the message that the person sent, and that can be an varchar max. And then finally we're going to add a column called sent on, and that's going to be a date time. Basically we're going to get that to assume a default value of get date, so that when we add a new record that populates itself. So let's go ahead and save that. And to give you a bit of an example of how we're going to go ahead and use that, I'm just going to perhaps put in a sample record. So let's go ahead and add a row, and I'm going to put in my name, Davey, message, hello world. And if I save that, we can see that it's automatically assumed a value for sent on. Fantastic. So let's go along in MobileNation and connect to that. So we're going to start by creating a new blank phone app, and we're going to bring our data from SQL Azure straight in. So I'm going to go add database. I'm going to connect from an enterprise database, and then I'm going to put in my connection info. So you can see this info in the SQL Azure Connect to mine. And we'll move forward. So if we look along the place, we can see our instant messages table. So we're going to go ahead and bring that into our application. So our data source has been added, and now we're going to put this straight into a table view. So let's go ahead and drag in a table view. Now I'll move this view out of the way so you can see the data sources as they're added. So let's go to our instant messages, and I'm just going to drag some of our data on there. And you can see that's created data excess of a table view. Now I won't look at it at the moment. I'm just going to go to my data excess of the table view, and I'm going to turn off the loading overlay because we're going to go and fetch this data repeatedly, and when you have a loading overlay, you're not able to actually interact with the device. So let's go to our table. I'm just going to turn off group alphabetically because it's not relevant. And under our column to display, I'm going to show some custom information. So I'm just going to select advanced for our column to display, and I'm going to put in some custom information. So typically in an instant messaging client, we might write at the time that it was sent, whoever wrote it said, and then we might have our message. So I'm just going to differentiate those by making the top row there line to the right, and we're going to reduce the size. That looks fairly like an instant message right now, right? Okay, and the next step that we need to do is to be able to actually go ahead and insert a record into that database. And this one's going to match up to the person's name. So just bring these down to size a little bit. And I'm going to call this one name field. And then in my placeholder I might just say your name. Then we're going to need the text field to correspond to the person's messages. So drag another one in. And I'm going to call this one message field. And I'll give the placeholder of message. Then we're going to need a button that we hit so that we can actually go ahead and send that message. So let's go ahead and make that button say send. Now what we want to do is when we hit that send button, we want to go ahead and insert a record into the database. So let's click on our button and we go to its actions, and when we touch down, we go to this data excess of the table view, and we want to go and insert a row so we can see that we now have our columns that we can import. So logically we're going to connect up from our name field's text into the name cell, and likewise we're going to do the same with the message field text. Right, so now we've actually gone along and inserted a new record. So let's go ahead and preview that. And when we run that, I might say here. Now when I hit send, it's actually not going to update in that table view until I've refreshed it. So if I go ahead and refresh this project, you can see that that came in there. We can also see if we go to our management portal in SQL Server database, if I go along and refresh our table, there's our new data. So there's a couple of things that you may notice that are not quite right with this application. One of them is that you really want to get your messages up the top first. So what we're going to do in SQL Server is create a view that shows this information. And the second thing that we want is for this view to be continuously updating so that when people are typing their messages, you see them in this table. Server Management Console. And we're going to create a view that shows our instant messages, probably only the top 10 in descending order of when they were actually sent on. So I'm just going to create a new query, and I'm going to say create view instant messages view as select the top 10 everything from instant messages, and we're going to say order by sent on descending. So if I run that, if I now say select star from instant messages view, we can see that our most recent message is on the top, and we only show 10 records. So going back to Mobile Nation, we're actually going to show this in that table. So what I'm going to do is go to my data repository, and I'm going to add a data source once again from an enterprise database. I'm going to enter my connection details. And I'm going to bring in my instant messages view. And what we're going to do is just drop that data source on there, and we're going to change things a little bit. So we're going to go to our table view, and rather than connecting to our data set accessor for the table view, we have the instant messages view. So I'm just going to say sending messages. Okay, so if we go to our view here, rather than using our original one that we're inserting data into, we're going to switch it over to ascending messages, and you can see that now it's in ascending order. So the last thing that we need to do is to get this thing refreshing by itself, and we're going to do that using a timer widget. So I'm going to drag a timer onto the stage. I'm going to say that every 3 seconds, I'm going to pull it in my actions panel, every 3 seconds we're going to go along and update those messages. So if we go to our ascending messages view, I'm going to fetch data. Now the timer doesn't actually start until you tell it to. So we want the timer to start as soon as our application loads up. So if we just select our default view, we're going to go ahead and wire up to the timer and say start timer. And finally, we're going to turn on the nav bar, and we're going to call this instant messaging. Now finally, we're also going to want to turn off the loading overlay for our brand new data source. So let's go ahead and select that. We'll turn off loading overlay while fetching. Take a look at that. And we'll open that up in the browser. And let's put myself down as Booyah.